I used to be an adventurer like you when I took an arrow. You can't win this! I can still put up a fight. Children of
It was that dream again. 8 years had passed since he had slain the legendary dragon. On legendary difficulty mode. Since then, he and Lydia had been on many adventures. They had plundered many tombs, defeated many foes, and slaughtered many innocents. But something dark now haunted Odgrub's dreams. For 65 years he had terrorized this empire. Generals and kings had fallen at his hand, but he was growing old, and his strength was leaving him. What if he was no longer the best? But Odgrub is not one to go down without a fight. He was still a legendary warrior and was aided by his trusty pack mule, Lydia. He may have used her to carry his burdens, but she had grown rather fond of the old man. Thanks to him, she had seen the world. She had been on journeys that other NPCs couldn't even begin to imagine. And, as heartless as he was, he hadn't killed her yet. Maybe, deep down, he valued her company. She looked to him as a god and continued to serve him faithfully, despite what she had to carry. Despite his short temper, suicidal tendencies and absolute moral bankruptcy. Despite him regularly blasting her off mountains. She loved that man. But their time together was nearing its end. Odgrub was fed up of carrying around an Elder Scroll with him wherever he went, but strong magic prevented him from dropping it until certain quests were complete. So he decided it was finally time to beat Skyrim's main storyline. He'd already done quite a lot of it, and the next part was to arrange a peace treaty. This first meant speaking with the Jarl of Whiterun, who looked oddly familiar. Ah yes, that was him. This might be an awkward encounter.
You're not as dumb as you look.
Apparently not. He behaved as though he didn't remember Odgrub at all.
Maybe you can stop the dragons.
With him on board, it was time to move on to another old man.
You're not as dumb as you look.
Next was to meet with the Greybeards, who were atop the tallest mountain. So he ran and ran, and ran and ran. And Lydia too. Odgrub had defeated the toughest creatures in all of Skyrim. Surely he could climb its tallest mountain. The route was long and treacherous. He had to go down into the valley, before up again to Ivarstead and then onto the mountain passes. But something felt different. He began to pant and gasp. His limbs grew heavy, as though he was hot butter scraped over too much bread. Was this what it was to grow old? Eventually he could take it no more. He had to fast travel the rest of the way. High Hrothgar, an ancient monastery situated above everything else in Skyrim. It guards the only path to the mountain's summit and is home to some of the wisest beings of the land. The Greybeards, a bunch of old men with beards who like to shout a lot. It is with them that Odgrub must arrange a meeting if Skyrim is to be safe from the second biggest threat it has ever seen. To give them credit, they seemed like pretty decent folk, and they put up with Odgrub's buffoonery for a commendable amount of time. Patience of a saint. Eventually, Odgrub tired of this tomfoolery and spoke with their leader. They agreed to arrange a peace council between the leaders of Middle Skyrim. All Odgrub had to do was to... One of the Greybeards, it seemed, had finally grown tired of Odgrub's shit. Odgrub was humiliated by the man, thrown about the ancient halls like Gandalf the Grey. But he finally had his chance to retaliate, and he put the fight on ice. He collected his Lydia and left.
As you will, my Thane. I will protect you with my life.
But not so fast. The Greybeards weren't letting him go that easily. He had had enough with just one of these guys repeatedly blowing him, but two of them was enough to keep him perpetually rock hard. They'd almost give him time to react, but then would overpower him again, leaving him on all fours and in an exposed position. Yet another old man joined the party, and the threesome got Odgrub closer and closer to a not-so-happy ending. Before they had him completely surrounded, Odgrub launched a counter-attack. He fought back, putting up considerable resistance against their advances. But he wasn't as fast as he once was, and soon the three old men were dominating him again. The situation seemed hopeless. Then, suddenly, Lydia had come to help. Granted, she was taking her sweet time about it, and he could have done with her a bit earlier on. But he wasn't complaining. Not that he could in his current state, for she could have just gone and left them all to it, and everybody's fates would have been different had she done so. But no, she remained faithful to him, for better or for worse, and attacked the Greybeards, who didn't even seem to acknowledge her presence, which was their big mistake. This was it. It was now or never. Now or never. Come on, Odgrub. Odgrub resisted their attacks and turned the tide of the battle. He separated one of the Greybeards from the rest, and soon the mountain was raining men. And Lydia. Don't worry, she's used to it. But Odgrub had to hold his ground against the two remaining mythical monks until her return. He couldn't kill them, for they were wearing plot armour as thick as Lydia's thighs. He could only hope to knock them off the edge of the cliff. And soon he brought the fight back down to 1 versus 1. It was a battle for the ages, and their shouts could be heard from across the land. Most trembled in terror at the sound, but there was one who saw things differently. Lydia returned to the fray, and the pair took in turns to pound the remaining Greybeard. Teamwork had saved the day, and Odgrub let Lydia land the final blow. They had proven once again why they were Skyrim's best, and at that moment, Lydia felt like she was on the top of the world. But the main quest isn't going to beat itself. Odgrub next had to arrange a peace treaty. So he ran and ran, and ran and ran. He fell down a strangely familiar path and was soon on his way towards solitude. He could have done the same route as before, but he got confused and turned off too early, instead going through that bit of Skyrim that nobody bothers going. Along the way he was attacked by cats, dogs, mud crabs, giants and dragons, and at one point got stuck in a bush for an embarrassing length of time. Back in his day, the roads weren't so bumpy and the days weren't so long. It looked like he was getting tired, but he swears he wasn't, and that he was simply bored of the scenery. So he fast travelled the rest of the way. You may think that Odgrub isn't the best person to organise a peace treaty, but within just a few clicks he had convinced the military governor of Skyrim to attend.
Yes, fine. I'll come to this Greybeard council.
With that out of the way, Odgrub then headed on to the last person he needed to talk to. If you're a little unsure what this peace council is about, you're not alone, for Odgrub skips most dialogue. You can be sure that it's something to do with the end of the world and that only the player can save the day. Skyrim just kind of drew a short straw with Odgrub. For Odgrub does not believe in conversation. He'd rather fill his time with important stuff, like bashing things and running across Skyrim. Right now he is on his way to Winterhold to speak with Ulfric Stormcloak. Convincing him will be difficult, for he is the sworn enemy of General Tullius. It will probably take at least 5 clicks. Back in his day, he swears this walk wasn't so long, or the snow so slippery. Odgrub finally arrived at the city walls, but couldn't find the entrance. Walking around them would take a while, so he fast travelled instead. But things are never simple, are they? For when Odgrub reached the Great Hall, it hadn't yet reset from the last time he had visited. Ulfric and his generals had bugged out and were floating about on the floor in a rather lewd position.
Call yourself a warrior?
Odgrub tried waiting an hour to see if they calmed down, but they remained in their agitated state. Not like this. Odgrub's tale couldn't end like this. But then he had an idea. Well, it was worth a try.
Come on, I dare you.
Fortunately, leaving the city, then returning again, solved the issue. And before long, Odgrub the expert negotiator had convinced Ulfric to attend the peace treaty as well.
Yes.
Now to head back to the mountain. He wanted to fast travel, but Lydia was watching and he didn't want to appear weak. So he ran and ran, and ran and ran, then found a corner out of sight of Lydia and fast travelled the rest of the way. The finest minds and greatest warriors gathered at the throat of the world, thanks to Odgrub's peacekeeping efforts. The Greybeards were all present and accounted for too, and didn't seem to hold their grudge against Odgrub. Like I said, jolly decent folk. Everybody sat around the table and discussed the future of Skyrim, the fate of the world. They negotiated and they talked. It was the most boring moment of Odgrub's life.
I have every right to be at this negotiation. I need to ensure that
Nothing is agreed to here that violates the terms. Any sort of imperial bluster the sons of Skyrim
Finally, everybody became friends, the mission complete. Then Odgrub shared his feelings about the meeting. A fight broke out in the Peace Council, though the Greybeards showed their wisdom by not getting involved this time. Soon he cast them back from whence they came, and Lydia helped too. It was probably best that Odgrub and Lydia left for the wilderness until everybody forgot about this whole incident. It was just like the old days again. They raided tombs, slayed dragons, triggered elaborate booby traps, amassed cool-looking scars, bravely rushed where others feared to tread, slaughtered bandits, and brought numerous species closer to extinction. Of course, Odgrub could do all this himself, and yet he never forgot to bring Lydia, and she did her part well. She had his back and saw to it that he didn't enter the fray alone.
I am sworn to carry your burdens.
And of course, she carried his burdens.
I am sworn to carry your burdens.
Boy, did she carry those burdens. But she carried her own too, for she loved that man. But how he felt towards her remained a mystery, for he seldom spoke. For a man only fluent in the language of death, silence was praise indeed. But it had been years. She had faithfully stuck by him and done her duties. But she had to ask herself, was this it? Was she only ever going to be a supporting role in a man's story? What about her story? Did he care at all for her, and if so, would he ever show it? Oh, how many hours she spent thinking about this, rolling dreams of reciprocation about in her head over and over again. It was tearing her apart. They may have done everything together, but she carried this burden alone. Some days it was hard, but it was at times like this, when the northern lights were out, and with Odgrub finally asleep, that she'd watch him and dream about how things could be. And she hoped that, somewhere, inside that head of his, he was thinking about her too. Odgrub needed to piss. It was all a dream, apart from the peeing. He'd pissed himself. That's twice now it had happened on her watch. He was beginning to have his doubts about her. He didn't speak about what happened. He never did. But Lydia could sense that something was wrong. It was as though there was a dark shadow following him wherever he went. He wasn't the man he used to be. He looked older. He got confused. Age seemed to be one challenge that he couldn't beat by bashing things. Not that he didn't try. For the first time, she saw a more vulnerable side to him. It was almost as though he was afraid. But also angry. So angry.
I've got a bad feeling about this. Oh.
Odgrub killed Lydia, breaking her heart and stealing her soul. He trapped it in the Black Star, then used it to enchant a pair of gauntlets that let him carry more weight, since she so clearly enjoyed carrying his burdens. Then, to show he didn't need her, he tossed her off Skyrim's jaws into oblivion.
I am sworn to carry your burdens.
Odgrub carried on doing what he did best. He butchered bandits and slaughtered civilians. But it didn't feel quite the same without somebody there to witness it. At night he'd walk around completely naked. But again, it felt empty without somebody there to judge him for it.
You might consider putting on something.
There a reason you're walking around with an unsheathed weapon?
Don't start swinging that thing in here.
On his own, his actions lacked the sense of purpose they once had. It was then that he realised what he had done. In one of his many moments of confusion and blind rage, he had killed the one person who cared for him. The one person who accepted Odgrub for who he was. The one person who loved him. And now she was gone, he missed her. What he'd give to see her again. That's when he made it his goal to do so. You see, when Nords die, they go to Sovngarde. Those who are deemed valiant are rewarded everlasting life in the Hall of Valor, where they have a gay old time eating, drinking, brooding and singing. Lydia has indeed proven herself worthy of this honour, by being a good Thane who has always carried her burdens. She's even been killed in combat by another Nord. As luck would have it, the main quest of Skyrim ends by taking the player to Sovngarde, so all Odgrub has to do is to beat the last mission and he might even see her again. This mission started with capturing a dragon. Captured, the goal was then to release the dragon again, as long as he promised to be friendly and to fly Odgrub to Skull Daffin. Stupid name. It also seemed like a stupid plan.
This seems like a really bad idea to me.
Even the NPCs around the hall thought that. But they didn't understand Odgrub's special bond with nature and the power of plot armor.
Carry on, soldier. This is all part of the Dragonborn's plan.
Turns out that wasn't enough, and the dragon went wild, killing the court wizard and incinerating the Jarl of Whiterun, who by now must have been getting quite fed up of his part in this story. Odgrub did consider screwing this and going down the local for a pint, and it reminded him that he'd left the oven on. But for the first time in a long time, his life had a purpose, for he longed to see Lydia again. So he fought the dragon. It was a surprisingly difficult battle. Legendary difficulty made the dragon's flame super OP, and Odgrub chugged enough health potions to get sufficiently drunk anyway. Win-win. Eventually he threw down his enemy, but he too had plot armor, and it all bugged into a horrible stalemate. The quest was broken. Odgrub saw this and was all like, screw it, since this timeline was well and truly fucked. Yeah, let's just say that had been a dream, in a Surprise twist, just before this happened, Odgrub had fallen asleep next to the Jarl of Whiterun. They got up, headed to the courtyard, captured the dragon, and this time, Skyrim didn't bug into an unplayable state, which is perhaps the most implausible part of Odgrub's tale so far. He rode the dragon to the final mission and prepared for his most formidable challenge to date.
This is as far as I can take you.
Skull Daffen, gateway to Sovngarde, is a formidable place. Odgrub had to fight his way past several dragons and dozens of deathlords, all buffed by legendary difficulty. But he had purpose now, and it would take more than this to stop him. He got too cocky, pushing on a little too far, and was quickly blasted back down again. So he did it again, this time taking on each of them one at a time. He ran through a tomb and killed everybody there as well. Before long, he had slaughtered his way to the top of Skull Daffen, whereupon he faced Nachrin, the Guardian of the Door. This formidable opponent turned out not to be so formidable. And just like that, Odgrub gained temporary access to Sovngarde, where the souls of all Nordic heroes end up. It was here that he hoped to find Lydia.
Turn back, traveler.
But there was trouble in paradise. Odgrub would first have to defeat Skyrim's end boss. He wouldn't have to face him alone, for several of Skyrim's greatest heroes aided him in bringing down this winged nuisance. Together they shouted away the gas, but Alduin simply produced more, so they did it again. And so this continued until he showed himself, and the fight was on. As expected, Odgrub did most of the work. The others served as meat shields and bore the brunt of Alduin's flame attack. He used his dragon crash landing spell, then bashed it again and again, and again and again. Finally, he put an end to the dragon, and with it, Skyrim's main quest. With the dragon defeated, Odgrub headed off to find his Lydia. He crossed over the legendary bridge to the Hall of Valor. But he couldn't find her. Anywhere. Where was she? Oh, Odgrub, you've made a big mistake. For Lydia never made it to Sovngarde. Her soul remains bound to the gauntlets that you tossed off the mountain in a moment of anger. There she remains, lost and alone, denied the ending she deserves. There's nothing in Sovngarde for you. Odgrub's visitor pass expired, and he was returned to Skyrim to live out the rest of his days. He tried filling the Lydia-shaped hole in his life with other people. They aided him in combat. They carried his burdens. They were essentially Lydia. But they weren't Lydia, and they never lasted long. In fact, being with others only made him miss Lydia more. Now, don't be mistaken. This isn't a love story. Odgrub's far too manly to be attracted to a woman. But he missed his friend. In fact, without her, nothing was worth doing anymore. Odgrub II had made the game too lonely. The illusion of Skyrim had been ruined, and, on that disappointment, he headed off to the mountain, where he wanted to be alone. But on the way there, he happened upon a friendly dragon. This miserable, lonely creature had once terrorized Skyrim. It had done evil things, for which the world had still not forgiven him for. In fact, one of the quests in Skyrim is to kill him for this very reason. But he explained how he had changed, how he no longer wanted to hurt people, but instead wanted to be a force for good. He had overcome his evil nature, and for what? Why do all that, only to hide away for the rest of his life? As far as Odgrub was concerned, the dragon had given up on life. It now lived in solitude, regretful of the past and waiting for death to come. And Odgrub realised that that was what he too was at risk of becoming. He had a choice to make. He killed the dragon and decided that, unlike the creature, he wanted to be remembered as more than just a cold-blooded killer. And there was no better place to start than here, where he had thrown Lydia from. He descended the mountain, searching every ledge and crevasse. He braved storms and freezing temperatures. Days passed, and he grew weaker and weaker. The chances of finding her were minuscule, and grew smaller by the second. Odgrub stumbled. He fell. But he got back up again, time after time. Then, one freezing night, he found the gauntlets that Lydia's soul had been bound to. He may not be able to carry Lydia's burdens, but he can carry her. She didn't deserve to be left, bound to those gauntlets on that mountainside forever. While Odgrub hadn't always been the best friend, he now made it his goal to be one, and to give her a happier ending to her story. He wasn't sure how. Maybe somebody smart in the College of Winterhold would know a way of freeing her soul from the gauntlets. All he had to do was to get there. But it wouldn't be easy. He hadn't slept in days. He was exhausted, but knew that resting here, he might never wake up again. So the old man made his way down the mountain and to the College of Winterhold. But something stood in his way. He and Lydia would fight together, one last time against this mountain of a man. But this was unlike any foe he had encountered before. He was bigger, faster, stronger. For the first time, Odgrub was well and truly outmatched. The warrior's blade cut through Odgrub like a hot butter knife. He outsmarted Odgrub at every turn, and before he knew it, Odgrub was dead. For all his flaws, he was deemed worthy of Sovngarde, and found himself back where he once stood as a free man. Only this time, he was there for good. He had earned a high score in Skyrim's Hall of Fame and joined the ranks of legendary warriors. In Skyrim, tales would be sung for the others, of the courageous things they had done with their lives. But not Odgrub. His life only left a trail of death and misery. Who would want to tell his story? Skyrim would move on. This was Odgrub's punishment, to be sat alongside true heroes in the Hall of Valor, for all eternity. It wasn't all bad. Odgrub no longer felt like an old man. He no longer ached or got confused. Odgrub could eat what he wanted. He could drink his fill and do manly stuff forever with other manly men. You could say it was like heaven, but he didn't want any of that. There was one pain this place couldn't heal, for he knew someone who deserved his spot in Sovngarde far more than he did. And there it was. For the first time in his life, somewhat ironically after his death, he did something good, something selfless. And this act made Odgrub feel weird. He felt good. Until now, his life had all been about himself. By considering others, countless opportunities and new adventures had suddenly opened up to him. He had a new reason to live. But that doesn't matter now, does it? He was stuck in Sovngarde forever. With the brawlers, the drinkers, the bards. Unless...
Cloud visits very often. There's no...
Odgrub was banished from Sovngarde, returning to Skyrim to live out what remained of his life. He had been given a second chance, but at a terrible cost, for he has forsaken his place in the Hall of Valor. Where he'll go after he dies now is anyone's guess. But why spend this life worrying about the next? Odgrub was keen to make the most of this one. But first he needed to deal with the dark figure, who'd otherwise endlessly hunt him down and haunt his dreams. It was a formidable opponent, even for Odgrub the White. It sports the finest armour and weapons, impossibly high stats, high resistance to everything, and hitting him has a chance of killing Odgrub. There's not a lot you can do against such a foe. But when has that ever stopped Odgrub? He got to where he is by glitching and exploiting the game's mechanics, and he'll do it again, if that's what it takes. So he got to work, stocking up on potions to aid him against a legendary enemy, at legendary difficulty.
What you gonna do, huh?
He blessed himself with the Lord Stone, giving him increased resistance to attacks. And then he set off to find the warrior. There he is. The two warriors fought atop the mountain edge, but it wasn't long before the dirty tactics began. The warrior could blow Odgrub away, and then he disarmed Odgrub, meaning that he had to pick up and re-equip his weapon again. What a nuisance. All the while, the warrior was raining down sword blows of his own, and boy were they powerful. Odgrub made it his goal to blast the warrior off the side of the mountain, but he botched the first attempt and had to hold his ground until his shout could recharge. Odgrub had to regularly heal, downing potions like there would be no tomorrow. Odgrub was blown again, but luckily smacked face first into a boulder. Odgrub went for his second chance to knock the warrior off the side of the mountain, and messed it up again. The warrior had a deflect ability, meaning that Odgrub often hurt himself while striking his opponent. It wasn't fair. More blows were exchanged, and more health potions were chugged. Odgrub was launched into the cliff face, and retaliated with his own shout, blasting the warrior back from whence he came. It had been a challenge, and it felt kind of cheap to have defeated the warrior in this way. But Odgrub doesn't play by the rules. Apparently, neither did the warrior, whose health had been restored to 100% by a fall. He then disarmed Odgrub again, then blasted him down the hill before he had time to re-equip his weapon. Odgrub was surrounded by bears and wolves, now armed with nothing more than just his bow. And then the warrior caught up. Odgrub would have to defeat him with just a bow as well. So he resorted to the age-old strat of running backwards, firing hundreds of arrows as he went. Nothing worked against this foe. Odgrub was sliced, bashed and blasted across the rift, his only lifeline being his stockpile of potions. But he was getting through those rather quickly. Dusk turned to night, and others joined the fight, surprisingly on Odgrub's side. The farmers didn't last long, but that dragon Odgrub had ridden earlier deserved an A for effort. Even his flame proved ineffective against the warrior. Legendary difficulty had made him unstoppable. His health simply refused to go down. A few hours later, and the dragon was all like, screw this, and rage quit, leaving Odgrub alone again. Time and time again he'd get the warrior's health down low, only for him to immediately heal back up again. What could the man do against such reckless healing? The people of Skyrim, who Odgrub had spent so many years slaughtering, came to his aid in his hour of need. The local guards did their best, giving Odgrub time to heal. But you guessed it, the warrior wrecked them too. They reached a barbarian outpost, and Odgrub had a plan. He lured the warrior up to the highest point. Then he blasted him off. It worked perfectly, reducing his health, but not enough for him to reset to 100% again. Time was urgent. They needed to beat the warrior now, before his healing could kick in. They were so close, but it wasn't enough, and the warrior recovered. Victory seemed impossible, so Odgrub ran to Ivarstead for backup.
I've been looking for you. Got something I'm supposed to deliver. I've got it. Looks like that's it.
I'll make you pay!
Nobody was awake, so Odgrub instead started to climb the tallest mountain in Skyrim. It would have been poetic to blast the warrior off this mountain, not that it would defeat him, so instead, Odgrub came up with another plan. With only a handful of health potions left, Odgrub ran, fell, and flew his way up the mountain, dodging ebony arrows as he went. He ran and ran. As night turned to dawn, he reached the top. He had made it. Back to the home of the Greybeards. Jolly decent folk, but get on their bad side and they'll mess you up. The Ebony Warrior may be the toughest thing in Skyrim, but that means nothing when up against 3 invincible wizards. This is what happens when an unstoppable force meets 3 immovable objects. This fight is destined to go on forever. Of course, had Lydia been there, or if Odgrub was a bit younger, things would have been different. But he was tired and just wanted to sleep. He said his final farewell to this place, to the Greybeards, and to his brother. He awoke to a beautiful sunrise. The darkness had gone, and he was free. But what would he do now? He could have masked his identity and retired. He could have given up, lived in solitude, regretful of the past and waiting for death to come. But that's not Odgrub. The clock is ticking and his time is almost up. And he's going to make every second count. He has done terrible things that he'll never forgive himself for. That Skyrim will never forgive him for. Can Odgrub ever hope to atone for his past? He's going to find out. Wherever there's trouble, he'll be there. He'll be the shield that stands between the citizens of Skyrim and the evil creatures and rogue warriors that mean them harm. His strength may be leaving him, but he will fight on until his final breath. He'll forever miss Lydia. He failed her, but will see to it that she's remembered as a hero, as the person who saved Skyrim from its greatest threat, turning Odgrub into a force for good. As for Odgrub, well, he could have died a villain, but instead hopes to live long enough to see himself become a hero. He now dreams of a different Ebony Warrior. He likes to think that Lydia's soul somehow made it to Sovngarde, and that one day she'll learn how much Odgrub has changed. Of course, this is just a dream, but it's what keeps him going. To think that Lydia might still be watching. He'll do her proud. But if it's redemption he's after, he's got a long way to go. Skyrim's not ready to acknowledge that he's changed. Yet. For now, that's just a glimmer of hope. A faint flash of lens flare. For the foreseeable future, they'll hunt him. And he'll take it. Because, for now, he's not a hero. He's Skyrim's silent guardian. A watchful protector. A dark knight, an Ebony Warrior.